6 weeks into the carbon tax, and many small businesses are getting nasty shocks in their power bills. The bills are now Exhibit A in the Coalition's carbon war in the federal parliament. But fact is, a large part of the price hike is not due to carbon pricing, and the government is pushing back hard. Here's political editor Chris Yeoman.
I refer the Prime Minister to the Belair Hotel in my electorate.
I do know the Belair Hotel.
Yesterday in relation to the Belair Hotel.
This is a bit like the discussion we just had about the Belair Hotel.
For 2 days, an Adelaide Hills pub has occupied some of the biggest players on the national stage, for one reason.
To the Belair Hotel in my electorate that has just been hit with their first electricity bill under the carbon tax.
I'd be very interested in seeing the account that the member for Boothby is referring to.
Well, the carbon adjustment pricing that I've just received from my first AGL bill in July increased my off-peak capacity and my off-peak charge by 44% and my peak charge by 18%. So it was a combined increase of 26%.
The bill's been presented, dissected and passed in Parliament. The hotel's owner says the price hike is the latest in a series of imposts, and he fears for the future.
I'm thinking worse is to come because, as I was saying to some friends of mine, my local butcher and baker haven't got their bills yet. So what happens when they get their bills and work out how much they've got to put up their costs to me? So the knock-on is still to come. I think in 3 months' time we'll really start to see the effects.
Brett Matthews' $19,000 bill is a $3,500 increase on one he got just 6 months ago for the same level of usage. At $1,800, carbon tax makes up just under 10% of the rise. His story is one of a procession through Parliament as rising power prices and the politics of carbon collide.
The Silver City Cinema in Broken Hill, in my electorate of Farrer, has reduced the number of screenings from 30 to 15 a week.
Johnny Wren has owned the cinema for 20 years. He called his electricity company after being shocked by the latest bill.
I was really taken back because, they said, well, we're prepared now to take $800 a week out of your bank account. I said, well, some weeks we're not even banking $800 a week here at the cinema.
But Johnny Wren knows his power problem started well before the carbon tax.
Our electricity price increases started probably about 18 months ago.
As this program pointed out in June, there are a lot of factors driving power prices higher. Nationally, they've gone up an average of 30% over 5 years, but in New South Wales it's been closer to 80%. A large chunk of the increases come from networks rebuilding infrastructure and passing the cost down to retailers. But it's arguable they're overspending, and that even frustrates the energy regulator.
We've challenged all of the proposals put in front of us. There are fundamental reasons for these increases in prices. Nevertheless, we consider that some of the increases have been more than necessary, but they have been allowed under the rules under which we operate.
It's an argument the Prime Minister's been pushing for a fortnight.
And I've made it very clear that my concern is the 50, 60, 70% increases that people have seen without any real attempts at assistance, and that some of that has been generated by the decisions and conduct of state governments.
And one the opposition leader seemed to accept last year.
Electricity prices have risen quite a lot over the last few years without a carbon price. Do you think those rises have been reasonable?
I think that at least some of those rises have been due to the state Labor government's failure to invest and the state Labor government's gouging usurious dividends from the utilities. Effectively, they've imposed a tax on the utilities.
There's no nuance in his argument now.
Let the public be aware. It is the carbon tax which is what's putting up everyone's power prices.
Greg Combe says a close look at the bills which have preoccupied Parliament shows the cost of the carbon tax is what was expected.
With the carbon price coming in, only $9 out of every $100 on someone's bill is attributable to the carbon price. The key driver of price increases has been prices being pushed up by investment in poles and wires.
And he says that government compensation payments will flow from customers to small business.
But in addition to that, the government's using proceeds of the minerals resource rent tax and the carbon price to provide a tax break for small business so that they can make a write-off of 100% of the value of each asset that they buy, up to a maximum of $6,500.
There is plenty of evidence to back the government's case, but perception is everything in politics, and the coalition is banking that many voters won't hear the government's argument, and all the pain of power price rises will be pinned on Julia Gillard because of her broken carbon tax pledge.
This is the deception that haunts this Prime Minister. This is the deception that will haunt her to a political grave. This is the deception that will dog this government to the next election.
A bid to censure the Prime Minister for that broken pledge drew independent Tony Windsor into the fray, saying Tony Abbott would have been prepared to make the same deal to take government.
He begged for the job, and he made the point, not only to me but to others that were in that negotiating period, that he would do anything to get that job. Anything to get that job.
But what matters most in the end will be what the punters in the front bar choose to believe.
Well, they're talking a lot about the tax, and they're all worried about their bills. And again, it goes to the same. Their bills aren't due for another couple of months, so I think everyone's very worried about their home electricity bills.
Political editor Chris Yeoman.